Sausage.
Hello, hello, and welcome to Attack the Backlog, the podcast where I, Mark Kuznez, that's me, tries to make a dent in their backlog, one game at a time. I don't really like that. I thought maybe I'd try something a little different, and I did that, and there was a pause because I thought to myself, that wasn't good. Should I re-record this? And here we are. Me, Marcus Ness, Attack the Backlog, podcast where I, Marcus Ness, tries to make a dent in their backlog one game at a time. This episode is all about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, a game where you play a Jedi who was laying low for reasons that are still relatively unknown. I am about 6 hours into the game. I just rescued the Wookiees, but I'm still looking for a particular Wookiee. So I'm currently doing that back on the planet of Zepho, I believe, to give you some kind of frame of reference of where I am in the game, how far I am in the game, if you want to play along with me and the game. But that is where I am. You play as Cal Caster? I don't know. The thing about the game so far, before we get into the meat and potatoes of it all, I'm liking it overall. There are highs, there are lows, there are things in the middle, but overall I'm having a good time. So, good on that. But I'm not quite loving it. Not that I thought I was going to love it either. First and foremost, it starts off quite well. After the initial bit of walking to your destination, teaching you a bit about the platforming and the parkouriness, not really parkouriness, but the climbing of the game, that all feels very Uncharted-y in how guided it is and how you don't really have a free ability to move around, which makes sense because this is a more linear game. It's not an open world exploration game. It is a guided Metroidvania-ish meets Dark Souls type of game, which I'll get to in more detail a little bit later. But it starts off strong with a nice set piece on a train that has a lot of bespoke moments and really good looking action sequences. And then it dumps you onto this after being rescued and meeting some fellow resistance folk, another former Jedi. Well, this is a former Jedi who has put her lightsaber and force powers away. You are a Jedi in hiding for, again, reasons unknown. Killers, good song. The retired Jedi is played by Deborah Wilson, I believe is her name, from Mad TV. And I think she's in the new Suicide Squad game as Amanda Waller, maybe. But for me, growing up with Mad TV, knowing her from that, and enjoying Mad TV at the time, it's hard for me not to constantly think of Mad TV when I see her, so it's a bit of a distraction.
And I would cut my staff in half, but I live in an apartment.
But after all of that initial opening set piece, you have your little tutorial area that teaches you the main ropes of the game, the real stuff you'll be doing, and the combat, and all of that jazz. And that is a not so great second impression, because that planet is the most boring, dull, ugly planet I've ever seen in any Star Wars game I've ever played. It is so barren and void of anything. You might think to yourself, what is it, Tatooine, the desert planet where Luke lived? I am not super versed in Star Wars lore and information. I've seen the movies. I've seen quite a few of the series, and I enjoy them to varying extents, but the only thing I've ever loved in the universe is KOTOR, which I've played multiple times and should probably play again because it's such an amazing game. But even compared to that planet, it is just this flat, nothing, boring, ugly, what I saw that part, or I played that part and thought, I really hope this is the worst this game has to offer, because if I have to play in a bunch of areas that look as bad as this, I'm not going to have a good time and are as dull in terms of level design. This is going to be a long, long game. But after that, it gets more interesting in both level design, the look of levels, what you're doing, what you're fighting. And that should be expected because you're just going through a tutorial, really, in that first area. But through the hours I've put into the game so far, it's been a mixed bag. Story-wise, it's kind of interesting. I'm halfway invested, and I know this has been said a million times by everyone else who's played the game before me. Cal Kasten, whatever his name is, he's a pretty blank slate, boring, nothing of a character currently. I don't think he's a bad character, but he doesn't have much personality. I don't hate him, but it's not that I feel super excited to be playing as him or super interested in him in general. Then, of course, there's the Deborah Wilson character who I just have my own issues with. The pilot alien is fine. He's a typical alien pilot, a little bit grumpy dude. And then, of course, you've got your little robot buddy in BD1, who is absolutely the highlight of the crew so far. I can't even say he's doing anything outside of what you would expect from a droid, but he's doing it well. And he has this kind of Wall-E meets Short Circuit vibe to him in how he looks. And I like that. I like that vibe. So I like BD1. Then when you were going on these various planets, meeting some other characters, I was not expecting to see any familiar faces. So when Forrest Whitaker's character showed up from Rogue One, and I'm sure he may have been in Andor a little bit, and could have been in some of the what is it? I always forget the name. Star Wars, the Republic, One Republic, One Direction. The animated series, the Clone Wars. That's it, right? He may have been in that at some point. I never watched that. But when he showed up, I was like, oh shit, I know him. And that was kind of a cool moment for me just because I have stayed relatively spoiler-free on the game. But generally speaking, story-wise, I'm vaguely interested. I'm vaguely curious in maybe learning more about the character I'm playing, Cal, why he went into hiding, what happened to his master, what happened to Deborah Wilson's character, why she moved away from the Force, and seeing how this potentially interacts is in because I'm not sure, with Forrest Whitaker showing up, then I feel confident in believing this is canon. So how this may relate to the movies, some series, and so on, And if I'll see any more familiar faces, that's definitely got me more intrigued as well. But the story's all right. Then the game itself, gameplay-wise, it feels pretty good. It's clear that this is made from or by Respawn because there's lots of wall running. There will never be a Respawn game without wall running. But there's one thing that is missing, and that's sliding. Come on now. You're so good at sliding. Apex Legends, best sliding in the business, but no sliding here. Or maybe that'll be an ability I learn over time. Because again, this is a game that you are earning XP that gives you skill points that you can put into your character to grant yourself more abilities with your lightsaber, increase your force powers, give yourself more force powers, or increase your health and stuff of that nature. You have those 3 different wings of your skill tree. And then you are, as you play more and more, unlocking items and other stuff. You're learning, relearning aspects of the Force because you've forgotten them, because that's how these games always work when they're designed this way. So you're relearning certain abilities like Force Push and Force Freeze that will allow you to explore more of the environment as you progress. And that will lead to you having to backtrack and go back to other planets where you couldn't have gotten to areas without these powers previously in a very Metroidvania-esque way. And then the Dark Souls side of things is in the combat, in that it is very parry heavy, though you also have a dodge roll that is useless. No, it's useful, but the parrying is important in this game, which is a little bit of a negative for me because I don't like parrying all that much. I'm way more of a dodge roll person, but with some of these enemies, you really do have to parry them to get through them relatively quickly. You can probably brute force and take much more time by just dodging them and getting in some little swipes at them, but parrying them works better. And you can change the difficulty so that parrying is much easier and you take less damage, or vice versa. And then if you die, your XP and all that will be where you died or on the enemy who killed you. If you fell off a cliff, then you'll just pick them up there. Or if you died from some enemy, you'll have to go there and kill them to get back your stuff in a very Souls-esque way. And instead of campfires, you have meditation spots where you can save your progress, refill your, not Estus flasks, but stim packs, I think they're called, and use your skill points. And if you decide to rest there and refill your stim packs, then all the enemies will respawn in a very, again, Souls-like way. Though I don't know if it was a bug or if certain enemy types will not continue to respawn, but an area on, I think, Kashyyyk, where stormtroopers are fighting against 2 spiders that spawned in. After a few times, the spiders didn't respawn. I didn't try and meditate again to see if they would respawn after that, but at least once the spiders just never showed up. Also, fuck the spiders. They're awful. They're bastards. The creatures, the stormtroopers in the game, not that bad to deal with. Kind of fun to fight. They give you some harder ones that have a bit of armor to make it a bit more challenging, but they're easy enough to deal with. The creatures suck ass, in part because quite a few of them will just pop up out of holes and fuck you over in a very cheap way. And the way they behave, because they're animals, they like to dodge back from your attacks, so they can just be a real pain in the ass to deal with in a not challenging way, but a very frustrating way. So fuck the creatures, especially the stupid ass, ugly, mole rat looking motherfuckers who look like they're Jim Henson reject puppets. I fucking hate them. They're so annoying. They're the easiest enemy in the game, probably, in terms of their health and whatnot. But in terms of them just popping out of holes all the fucking time, sometimes they would drop out of the sky because the physics are broken in this game. I hated them. Speaking of the physics, they are not the best. There are times where enemies, especially creatures, it seems like it happens to creatures more often than just the regular troopers. They will hit an object in the world or something, and then they will fly up in the air 10 feet and then come back down. Or they'll be levitating because there's some weirdness with the geometry. The game is janky, and it doesn't perform that well. I'm playing in performance mode, which gets the game up to 60 FPS, but it is not a locked 60 FPS. And I'm playing on Xbox Series X, and it feels smooth and nice a lot of the time, but there will be frame rate drops. There is a bit of stuttering here and there. It is not a smooth experience, and it drops and is noticeable enough to be a bit of a problem. But then if you turn off performance mode and play it on 30, which is not a locked 30, it did not seem locked in at all to me when I turned it back on just to see if that was better, if it would be a more consistent experience. That felt terrible, especially after playing 5 hours with the 60 FPS mode, because I did play that opening intro not knowing there was an additional mode or I could turn on performance mode, and it felt all right. But then when I turned it on, there's no going back. I can deal with 30 FPS when that's the only way. This is the way, the only way, said the Mandalorian. But if it's not the only way, give me that 60 FPS, even if it is an inconsistent, kind of janky mess. But ignoring the performance issues, in terms of the actual play, the controls feel great. It feels great to move around and fight and all of that. Sometimes it can get a little wonky dealing with enemies and locking onto them, where if you have enemies of varying, not heights in terms of their actual height, but you have one that's on the level you're currently on and then ones that are on a cliff above you. Sometimes in combat, just a few times, it happened where the enemy I was locked onto switched to one of the ones up on the cliff when I was still fighting enemies on the ground, and that would fuck things up because I would lose where the enemies on the ground I was currently engaging with were in this situation of where I was fighting, and that was not advantageous for me. But overall, it feels great, which is not surprising since Respawn is one of the best studios in terms of feel. Apex Legends is by far the best feeling battle royale game I've ever played. That's why I put well over 1,000 hours into that game. I adore that game. And of course, Titanfall 2 is an incredible, incredible game. And Titanfall 1 was fun as well. Just didn't have a single player experience, which I do enjoy myself. But overall, I'm enjoying the game. There have been a few puzzles here and there that haven't been that difficult, nor have they been super fun to do either. A lot of these ball puzzles that were just, okay, fine, whatever. Let the ball go there and the wind will blow it. And, everyone loves to blow some balls every now and again. I did find it a little bit annoying how the game would tell me, hey, if you need a hint for this puzzle, why don't you press this button and we'll give you one. And it would happen sometimes when I just got to an area. So I didn't even have any time to look at the surroundings and assess the situation, what I have to do, what I think I have to do. It didn't even want me to try. It was just like, do you want some help? I'm like, fuck, let me try first before I helped. And at one point I did ask it because I was curious what the suggestion would be. And it literally told me what I already knew. I knew what I had to do. What I was struggling with in that moment was how I do what I need to do. And it didn't give me any help there. It's just like, don't you know that you have to do this? You have to put the ball in this spot. And I just sat there befuddled thinking, how stupid do you think I am? Of course I have to get the ball there, obviously. Where else is the ball going to go? But what I want some help with is how exactly I do that. Can you help me out there? Motherfucker. But the worst thing about the game in terms of play, to wrap up this episode, is not the level design, but just navigating the world, how large these environments can be, and getting lost, because it is a three-dimensional world with various levels. And when you have a 3D map, it's really hard to make that not difficult to use and understand. Control is one of my favorite games of all time, but the one thing that game was not great at was the map. And Fallen Order is no different. There are probably examples, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it is inherently a challenging thing to do, and they did not find success in their implementation of the 3D map. So it's hard to find out where you have to go at times. And while this may go away from the Souls-ish nature, the Metroidvania nature of you discovering your way and it taking time, I do wish you could just push in a button and it would say, here is the main goal, here's your main objective in the world when you are playing the game, not going into the map screen, so that you have a general idea of the direction you have to go, what level it is in relation to where you are, and just go at it and figure it out in the game as opposed to in the map. I don't want to spend as much time in the map as I am currently playing the game, but I have to keep doing that to make sure I'm going in the right direction, because these areas, again, can be pretty big. And there is no kind of fast travel, which is something certain Metroidvanias have, where you can fast travel between save points sometimes to make it a little bit easier to get around. But when you return to a planet and something is at the complete end of the planet, the complete opposite side of it, you just have to go through all those areas you've already explored, and that can become very, very tedious. There is backtracking, and there is a lot of time wasted going through areas you've already gone through, that you've exhausted all the collectibles just because there was an area you couldn't get to and you have to go. There is a bit of that I find frustrating, in having to go through an excessive amount of areas that I just don't want to again. And even though you do open up shortcuts here and there, you never open up a shortcut that at the end of an area, which is something the Souls game, especially the first Souls game, did so incredibly well, is how intertwined that entire world was, where there could be an area that takes you forever to get to and it seems so far away, and then you find an elevator and it drops you down to the area you started the game in, and you're like, holy shit, this game is huge, but it's also so small. And you don't get that here, which is a bit unfortunate. But overall, having a good time, looking forward to playing more and seeing where the story goes, what new creatures are going to annoy the shit out of me, etc. So I'll report back with additional thoughts in another episode, and we'll see if it's just one more or two more episodes. But for now, that will do it for this episode of Attack the Backlog. Once again, I am Marcus Nez. Y'all can find me pretty much everywhere at PX Sausage. If you enjoy this here show or any of the stuff I do and what have you, you can support me and my nonsense over at patreon.com/PXS. There you can get access to a monthly Q&A, a couple of fancy Discord roles, a private Discord channel, random drops on the Patreon here and there, depending on your tier, of course. Or you can just support me to support me if that is your fancy. But that is it. That is not all, because in addition to the Patreon, you can find links to the site, the YouTube, the Discord, and so much more over at pxsausage.com. And again, the Patreon is patreon.com/pxs. But that is it. That is all. As always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed this here episode, and I hope as I hit the mic, you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day and a lovely, lovely, lovely just rest of your day. This is not I did it again. Oops, I did it again. Just have a lovely rest of your day. Lovely rest of your day whenever you happen to be watching this, as I can't speak anymore. Maybe in Marcus Nez again. Yeah, that's it. Ooh, but for now, you know the drill. Adios. Arrivederci. Bye bye.
It's go time. Go, Daddy.